Over the past 20 years, many superhero franchises have struggled at the box office, including the DCEU, Sony's Spider-Man universe, and Fox's X-Men universe, with only Disney's Marvel Cinematic Universe consistently succeeding and dominating the market with its well-crafted stories and interconnected narratives. Among these, the most abrupt and notable failure was the 2015 reboot of Fantastic Four, known as Fant4stic, which became infamous for its poor execution, lackluster storytelling, and disappointing reception from both critics and audiences alike. Unlike other franchises that ended after multiple installments, Fox's reboot never had a real chance to succeed. It faced numerous production issues, negative reviews, and huge financial losses that ultimately led to its rapid demise. The idea for the reboot first emerged in 2009, shortly after the previous Fantastic Four film series concluded, sparked by the expiration of contracts and the desire to refresh the brand with a modern take. Although a third film was initially considered due to the cast's contracts and the potential to explore new storylines involving characters such as Franklin Richards and Black Panther, the disappointing box office performance of the second film led Fox to shelve the script and rethink their approach. In the same year, Fox officially announced plans for a reboot featuring a new script penned by Michael Green and producer Akiva Goldsman. Jeremy Slater joined the project in 2012 to provide another draft and shape the narrative further. Director Josh Trank, who was hired following his critical success with Chronicle, collaborated with Slater on the screenplay, which initially included more action sequences and featured additional characters like Herbi, Mole Man, and the cosmic entity Galactus, aiming to expand the Fantastic Four universe in exciting ways. However, creative differences between Trank and Slater soon emerged. Slater favored a traditional superhero tone, akin to the Avengers, emphasizing team dynamics and heroic spectacle, while Trank sought a grittier, darker, and more character-driven story, focusing primarily on Reed Richards' personal struggles and complex psychology, which led to significant clashes in vision and direction. Their conflicting approaches caused major issues during development, creating a fractured and inconsistent script. According to Polygon, Slater wrote nearly 18 drafts totaling about 2,000 pages, yet only 2 of those drafts ever reached the studio for review, as Trank exercised strict control over communication and limited Slater's access to Fox's notes and feedback. Slater later remarked, "Right from the start, Josh told me I wasn't allowed to speak with Fox without him present. I never saw 95% of those notes," highlighting the breakdown in collaboration. After 6 months of turmoil, Slater left the project, and Simon Kinberg was brought in to revise and polish the script. With tight deadlines and a looming release date, Fox rushed production in a desperate attempt to avoid losing the Fantastic Four film rights to Marvel Studios, adding even more pressure to an already troubled project, and ultimately contributing to the film's failure to meet expectations both critically and commercially. When it came to casting, a number of well-known actors were considered for these iconic roles. Director Josh Trank always envisioned Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm, but for the role of Reed Richards, actors like Kit Harington, Richard Madden, and Jack O'Connell were all in the running before Miles Teller ultimately secured the part. Interestingly, the studio was initially opposed to Teller's casting, yet Trank fought fiercely to keep him, which is somewhat ironic, for reasons discussed later. For the role of Dr. Doom, Eddie Redmayne, Jack Huston, and Sam Riley were among those considered, before Toby Kebbell was cast, while Mads Mikkelsen even auditioned, but left midway through his session. Several actresses, including Saoirse Ronan, Allison Williams, Annie Rossum, and Margot Robbie, auditioned for Sue Storm, before Kate Mara was chosen. Mara wanted to prepare by reading Fantastic Four comics, but she was advised against it, since the film was meant to be an original story, not based on any particular source material. Regarding Ben Grimm, Fox initially preferred Josh Gad, but the role ultimately went to Jamie Bell, which turned out to be a silver lining amid the chaos, as Bell and Mara met on set and married 2 years later. Despite numerous script problems, the creative team pushed forward, and production began in May 2014. However, the difficulties for Fant4stic were far from over. The film was initially slated to shoot in Vancouver, Canada, but production was relocated to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, due to more favorable tax incentives. Filming lasted 72 days between May and August, and the process was tumultuous. Trank revealed that prior to filming, Fox cut the budget by $30 million, eliminating 3 major action sequences and significantly reducing the spectacle of the climax, with plans to shoot those scenes later. Originally, the movie was intended to run about 2 hours and 20 minutes, but it was ultimately trimmed down to just 1 hour and 40 minutes. According to Entertainment Weekly, the relationship between Trank and lead actor Miles Teller was fraught with tension, culminating in a near-physical confrontation where the two stood chest to chest, daring each other to throw the first punch. Neither did. There were also rumors that Trank treated Kate Mara coldly and harshly on set because he did not want her cast as Sue Storm, but was overruled by Fox. Additional rumors suggested that Trank behaved erratically and isolated himself during filming, sometimes arriving on set intoxicated, though these reports remain unconfirmed. The drama intensified when The Hollywood Reporter revealed that while filming in Baton Rouge, Trank and his dogs allegedly caused over $100,000 in damage to a rented house. To make matters worse, Trank started keeping a .38 special handgun by his nightstand after receiving multiple death threats related to his decision to cast Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm. Reflecting on this, Trank said, "I was so paranoid during that shoot. If someone came into my house, I would have ended their life. If you're in a headspace where people want to get you, you think I'm going to defend myself." The problems with the film didn't end when production wrapped. In fact, they only worsened. After a rough cut was presented to Fox executives, they expressed strong dislike for it, despite the fact that the film's climax and ending hadn't even been shot yet. Director Josh Trank was essentially excluded from the reshoot process. Fox commissioned new script pages that Trank never saw, and although he wrote additional pages himself, the studio disregarded them entirely. Trank described the experience to Polygon as feeling like being castrated, explaining that he was on set while producers Kinberg and Hutch Parker controlled everything, planning scenes mere minutes before filming, and having studio-hired editors dictate the shot order without his input. When asked if he approved, he felt compelled to say yes to keep his job. The reshoots were complicated further by scheduling conflicts with cast members, restricting filming to weekends. Noticeable continuity errors, such as Kate Mara wearing an obvious wig and Miles Teller's facial hair disappearing and reappearing between shots, underscored the haphazard nature of these sessions. Eventually, Trank involved the Directors Guild of America to protect his rights, leading to an agreement where he would re-edit the film while Fox created their own cut, both versions undergoing test screenings. Fox then hired Stephen Rifkin, an editor known for his work on Avatar and Pirates of the Caribbean, to assemble a cohesive final version, effectively making Rifkin the de facto director as Trank was denied any creative influence. The project spiraled rapidly out of control, deteriorating further with time, but Fox refused to cancel it, intent on preserving the rights. A telling sign of the film's decline was Stan Lee's decision to decline a cameo appearance, an early indicator of its poor quality. When Fantastic Four finally hit theaters on August 7, 2015, it opened at number 2 behind Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, earning $25 million in its first weekend. It eventually grossed $56 million domestically and $111 million internationally, totaling $167 million worldwide, which was insufficient to recoup its estimated production budget, ranging from $120 million to $155 million. Not to mention additional marketing, distribution, and exhibitor costs. The Hollywood Reporter estimated losses between $80 million and $100 million, making it the second largest box office bomb of 2015, surpassed only by Disney's Tomorrowland, which lost an estimated $120 million to $150 million. Financially, the film was a failure, and critically, it fared no better. Fantastic Four received an abysmal 9% critic rating and 18% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, a 4.3 out of 10 on IMDb, and a 1.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. It was nominated for multiple Golden Raspberry Awards, including Worst Screen Combo, Worst Screenplay, Worst Picture, Worst Director, and Worst Prequel, Remake, Spin-off, or Sequel, winning the last 3 categories. So, while the film failed on many fronts, it at least managed to secure some dubious accolades. During the production of this film, Josh Trank was hired by Lucasfilm to direct a Boba Fett movie. But after the release of Fant4stic, he left the project, explaining that he chose to quit before being fired. Even before the 2015 Fantastic Four began filming, Fox had already announced a sequel slated for a 2017 release. However, following the original film's poor reception, dismal box office performance, and weak home media sales, the future of the sequel became uncertain. Despite widespread criticism and skepticism, Fox decided to proceed with the sequel anyway. Simon Kinberg was brought back to write the follow-up, and in May 2016, he expressed his intention to use the same cast. Yet, in the following months, key actors Toby Kebbell, Kate Mara, and Miles Teller all publicly stated they had no interest in reprising their roles. Meanwhile, director Matthew Vaughn, known for Kingsman and X-Men First Class, and a producer on the 2015 film, showed interest in attempting to redeem the franchise with a new approach. Interestingly, Tommy Wiseau, the infamous creator of The Room, declared himself a big fan of Fant4stic and expressed a desire to direct its sequel. An idea that remains one of Hollywood's most intriguing what-if scenarios. Concept artist Alexander Lozano revealed that Trank's version of the Fantastic Four was even considered for cameos in Tim Miller's Deadpool 2, but these appearances never materialized. After Disney acquired 21st Century Fox in 2017, any talk of a direct sequel was shelved, and instead, Disney integrated a new iteration of the Fantastic Four into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Fortunately, the new Fantastic Four film has been met with a far more positive reception compared to the 2015 version. Whether or not you're a fan of the MCU, it's clear that the franchise is now in much safer hands. So with the troubled history of Fant4stic laid out, it's worth exploring the many reasons behind its commercial and critical failure. There are numerous factors, but the most significant was the overwhelmingly negative reviews and poor word of mouth from critics, fans, and general audiences alike, which made many hesitant to see the movie in theaters. Fox was aware of this, as they delayed lifting the review embargo until 7 p.m. on Thursday, coinciding with the film's first showings. When Fant4stic was released, it was widely regarded as one of the worst comic book movies ever made. Adding to the woes were costly reshoots that inflated the budget and made profitability unlikely. The publicized on-set drama further damaged the film's reputation, effectively dooming it before release. In fact, on the very day the film premiered, Josh Trank took to Twitter to criticize the movie, stating, "A year ago, I had a fantastic version of this, and it would have received great reviews. You'll probably never see it. That's reality, though." And then provocatively adding, "Fantastic version, you say? Say that again." Though he quickly deleted the tweets, the damage was done, with estimates suggesting this incident cost Fox $10 million. When a director publicly disowns his own film, it speaks volumes to potential audiences about whether they should invest their time and money. Usually, poor marketing contributes heavily to box office failures, but the first trailer for Fant4stic was actually quite strong. While much of the footage shown in the trailer didn't appear in the final cut, it did present an intriguing new take on the characters, and promised a more serious tone than previous films. This brings me to my next point. We need to acknowledge that the Fantastic Four brand was struggling with its reputation in 2015. The 2005 movie and its 2007 sequel received largely negative reviews, and while they made decent box office numbers, they weren't exactly blockbuster hits. The reboot by Fox was meant to be a fresh start, an opportunity to reintroduce these characters with a darker, grittier tone, after the previous, more cartoonish approach failed to resonate with audiences. This situation was somewhat similar to how Batman Begins revived the Batman franchise after the damage caused by Joel Schumacher's films. However, unlike Batman Begins, Fant4stic turned out to be a complete disaster. The film made several changes to the original comic book storylines that alienated longtime fans, with the portrayal of Dr. Doom being particularly disappointing. He's such a compelling and iconic villain, yet the movie completely mishandled his character. This lack of respect for the source material led many fans to reject the film and avoid supporting it financially. Compounding these issues was the fact that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was thriving in 2015, setting a high standard and inviting constant comparisons that only highlighted Fant4stic's shortcomings. Additionally, the movie faced stiff competition at the box office from Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation, which was both a critical and commercial hit, culminating in Fant4stic losing somewhere between $80 and $100 million. Now, moving on to my personal take on why the movie fails artistically. Surprisingly, it's not as terrible as I expected. Don't get me wrong, it's far from good. But considering the scathing reviews, I braced myself for something as bad as Artemis Fowl or Jonah Hex. However, there were actually a few moments and elements that I found somewhat enjoyable. Before I delve into the negatives, I want to acknowledge that there are scenes where the film effectively embraces a darker, horror-inspired tone. For example, the sequence where the characters teleport back from another dimension and Reed crawls desperately to reach Ben is genuinely intense and impactful. The subsequent scenes featuring the characters undergoing surgery lean heavily into body horror, clearly showing the filmmaker's intent to push that unsettling atmosphere further. Also, there's a surprisingly gory scene for a PG-13 movie where Doom walks through a facility, blowing heads off, which was unexpectedly cool and added to the dark vibe. The cast featured remarkable actors who had the potential to truly elevate the film with their talent and screen presence. Yet, unfortunately, the poorly written script consistently undermined their efforts, preventing them from fully realizing their characters and delivering the depth the story demanded. While strong performances occasionally shine through, these moments are fleeting because the actors are rarely given the opportunity to showcase their full range or deliver meaningful, impactful dialogue. The first half of the film is relatively decent, as it introduces the main characters and attempts to engage the audience with their origins and motivations. However, the pacing is flawed and uneven, which disrupts the film's overall flow, particularly when it shifts abruptly into a rushed and chaotic second half. A major narrative misstep is the one-year time jump, which creates a jarring divide in the story by skipping over a crucial phase where the characters would realistically learn to control their newfound powers, develop their relationships, and grow both individually and as a team. This gap results in many important conflicts and character developments being glossed over or occurring off-screen, such as the key tension between Reed and Ben, which is never properly explored and inexplicably resolved by the film's conclusion without any meaningful on-screen confrontation or resolution. Furthermore, the film disproportionately prioritizes Reed Richards, leaving Ben Grimm, Johnny Storm, and Sue Storm to fade into the background after the time jump, which diminishes the team dynamic that should be at the heart of a Fantastic Four story. Dr. Doom, the primary antagonist, is introduced only in the final 20 minutes of the film, arriving with a rushed and underdeveloped character arc that attempts to cram an entire movie's worth of villainous conflict and motivation into a brief, unsatisfying segment. This late introduction of Doom gives the impression that the film is little more than an extended first act, rather than a full and complete narrative, which is particularly disappointing given that the movie is titled Fantastic Four, and should ideally showcase the team fully formed, active, and facing substantial challenges throughout the entire story. The result is a film that feels incomplete and unbalanced, failing to capitalize on its talented cast and rich source material, ultimately leaving audiences wanting more depth, cohesion, and emotional resonance. The action scenes in this movie are so poorly done, they actually made me feel sick. There's barely any action, and what little there is feels dull and uninspired. 4 characters with fascinating powers end up in boring fights with no creative use of their abilities or real hero moments. Against Doom, they fall into the cliché of attacking one by one, which predictably fails. Their genius plan is to make the Thing invisible and punch Doom into a skybeam. Reed Richards, one of Marvel's smartest, comes up with a lazy, nonsensical punch. The final scene feels awkward, lacking chemistry as they try to crack jokes and deliver quips. At least we got to say that again meme. Arguably the best part. Given conflicts between director, actors, and studio, plus budget cuts and reshoots, it's no surprise that 2015 Fantastic Four was a colossal failure, losing millions and never launching the franchise. Now I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think this is the worst comic book movie ever? Thanks for watching. I'm grateful to all of you. See you next week with a hint about the next video.